Welcome back, 365 Sports. Paul and Craig here with you today. Max Olson of ESPN.com joins us now. And Max, we've talked about it for the majority of the show, but your opinion on the train wreck at Michigan right now and the very, very sad story of Sherrod Moore, and now how Ward Manuel on his way out the door as well, and where Michigan goes from here.
Yeah, certainly just a pretty dark and sad story all around, and obviously there's still a lot of details that have to come out here over the next day or two, with Sherrod Moore sitting in jail. Certainly, I know a lot of people said, like, oh, yeah, you're hearing rumors from us. So I didn't see that coming. When that notification hit yesterday, I certainly was pretty shocked. And I think it's, I think it puts Michigan in it's weird, like you'd say, oh, December 10th, 11th, it feels, too late for a coaching hire. And I guess that's not really true, but it kind of feels that way. It felt that way when that job opened yesterday. And I think the Wolverines are certainly in a really interesting spot here in terms of how do you move forward. And certainly, the question around who's making the hire is probably where you start.
Does the craziness of the coaching carousel make the craziness that already is existing and covering the transfer portal that much crazier? Or is it all just kind of even out in the wash?
Well, it probably depends on, you mean Michigan or just in general?
Just in general, but like,
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. This carousel absolutely contributes to the craziness of the portal. Gosh, in some ways you'd say like kind of a relief that the portal didn't open this Monday, because that would have been chaos, and that would have, that's the usual date it opens right after, the playoff selection and all that. So I guess it's probably good for everybody that you had a little bit of a cooling off period here at the end of the regular season. And yeah, obviously you're seeing guys declare and say they're going to go in the portal. And obviously we're in a time with a lot of renegotiations going on. But yeah, absolutely. I think that this portal cycle will be heavily tied, especially at the quarterback position, to the hires, to the coaching changes. And, I think that when this thing officially opens up on January 2nd, like they've shortened the window. We're only doing one window instead of two. I still think it's going to be like a record-setting amount of attrition and transactions. And part of that is the money, and part of that is the coaching changes, and the fact that we have unlimited transfers still. And I think it's when the clock starts midnight on the 2nd, I think it's going to be nuts, guys.
You mentioned the money part of it. Last year the thought was by a lot of schools, well, we have the house settlement and that will help us rein it in. Yeah. But now Texas Tech, Cody Campbell, and Joey McGuire have exposed, like, no, I mean, you can do it both ways. They were ready to do it both ways. Have you got an idea of schools that are maybe trying to mirror exactly what Tech is doing, at least as far as their rev share plus NIL?
Yeah, that's like kind of the big question throughout the industry right now. And, last year it was kind of straightforward. Like the schools that had the money, whether it was, donors like Cody Campbell and Dusty Womble, or if it's, having a strong collective or whatever, the ones that had the money it was kind of clear, like, okay, we're going to front load these. We're going to give you a lot of money now before July 1 when, the house settlement passes, and we're going to have a cap, and we're going to have all these rules around it. And so now I think the big question is sort of like, you're seeing coaches come out, Lane Kiffin and others say like, all right, I want to have, X amount of dollars over the cap on my new deal and things like that. You still have to figure out how to do that. Like, what's the clean way to actually get the money to the player? Because, they've got this CST, and yes, not everyone has agreed to the participation agreement and all that, but there's still like a fear of enforcement down the road here and stuff. So, that is kind of the challenge right now is people, have to figure out how to circumvent the cap, even though everyone says they're going to do it or they know other people are doing it. There's the devil's in the details there a little bit. And, certainly guys, as we get to the end of this season, GMs and coaches can say, well, we're trying to stick by the cap. We don't have that much money to spend. But ultimately, nobody's looking to take a pay cut for next year. So you got to figure out a way. Either you're going to lose players because you got to pay other guys, or you got to find a way to go around the cap and do it in a way that doesn't get you in trouble.
Fascinating. It's fascinating. It's always Always you got to evolve, man, right? And there's constant evolution in this game right now. There's no doubt about it. I know this is just kind of random, but what's the scuttlebutt? What's kind of the feel around Nebraska country with Dylan Raiola right now?
Yeah, hard to tell. To be honest, hard to tell. I think that there's, Matt Rule has been asked a couple times about it, and he doesn't want to address it, and wants to he's not going to speak for any of his players as the players make decisions. I think for Dylan Raiola, it's a tricky decision to make in terms of stay or go. On one hand, he is one of the highest paid quarterbacks in college football, and so you're like, okay, can you find another school that can pay you the same or more? Like, I think that's going to be an interesting thing for a guy who's coming off injury, who's going into his junior year, who certainly, like, I think you view him as a guy that still has potentially like first round potential, but don't know that he played that way as a sophomore. Can you find a school or be a school that puts you in a position to, be competitive for the playoffs, be competitive to be a first round pick and stuff? Like, I'm sure that for his camp, there's like a little bit of frustration about where the program's at or not being close to the playoff and Big Ten title contention, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, there's the question of, can you find a better situation? And then on the Nebraska side, it's like, okay, $3.5 million plus, like, you can get a lot of players in the portal for that kind of money. Like, I think they have their own kind of decision to make of like, do you want to move forward with Raiola, or do you want to, go re-sign TJ Lateef and spend that money elsewhere, right? I think so. Interested to see kind of what the final decision is there on both sides. I think right now, still pretty up in the air in terms of, is Dylan Raiola committed to Nebraska for 26, or is he going to explore his options?
Well, he also, though, I mean, like, he's played well there, but he's not been this would not be Sorsby leaving Cincinnati tragic to their offense either, right? I mean, it doesn't seem like a situation where it's a stare down in which one side is scared of losing the other.
Well, and there's an interesting kind of dynamic to that too, where it's like, I think the national perspective would be like, wow, that's a really bad loss for Nebraska if Dylan Raiola leaves after Matt Rule, just turned down Penn State or whatever, and like, just re-sign and all this stuff. They just lost Emmett Johnson at the draft. Like, I think it would look pretty bad outside looking in. And yet I think maybe to some folks who watch Nebraska football and watch TJ Lateef, play well against UCLA, struggle in the last two games, but it's sort of like, I don't know, maybe there's some merit to, like, if you lose him, maybe it's not necessarily the end of the world, as talented as he is, and him being, he's the face of the program, he's the identity of the offense, all that kind of stuff. Certainly you'd have to go find a really good replacement in the portal, and go find a veteran guy. And so that would be a scramble in itself. So, I think it's a super fascinating kind of crossroads moment there for Matt Rule and for Dylan Raiola in terms of finding the best way forward here.
What did you think of the, hiring of Matt Campbell and the fit and just his introduction, where clearly, like, he's a guy who waited a long time to make a move, Max, and now this Michigan job opens up and a lot of people are joking about, well, he should have waited a little longer, but he did so much for Iowa State, but you can't blame him for wanting to go accept a new challenge. And when you hear him talk about this job, it makes a lot of sense, all of the ties there. But what do you think of the fit, the hire, and the future there with Campbell and the Nittany Lions? And also Iowa State, having to pivot from the greatest run they've been on ever as well.
Yeah, certainly end of an era there at Iowa State, and certainly, to win 72 games in 10 years, to have 8 winning seasons in 10 years at Iowa State. When you guys remember, kind of where that program was before Matt Campbell arrived, like, just an unbelievable run there for the Cyclones and for Matt Campbell and his staff. And, a guy that, this was his goal all along, but I mean, you got to say, like, man, one of the best cultures in the country, and, just the consistency and the continuity of their staff and all that stuff, like, just an incredible run at Iowa State. And, to be quite honest, like, I think really over the last 3, 4, 5 years, just to me, I view him as one of the best coaches in the country. And you kind of just always wondered, like, man, why don't other people see that? Like, why isn't, one of these really big, kind of playoff level jobs surveying the landscape here and saying Matt Campbell's our number one choice? Like, we got to make him the priority. Why it's taken this long for that to happen, I don't totally understand. But, happy for him and his staff to get this opportunity to take what they've done at Iowa State and go to a place that has big time resources. And I think that was kind of the concern over time at Iowa State. It's just like, can you sustain this with a much smaller budget than even some schools in the Big 12. And so excited for that opportunity for them. I think obviously it's a build. I think that we will see Iowa State players follow them and Iowa State recruits follow them to Penn State. And so it's a big reset, I think, for Iowa State and for Jimmy Rogers. And interested to see the staff he puts together there. It's a new era for Iowa State, and I think a pretty major reset there to get back to being competitive in the conference.
How much of a reset do you think it is with Colin Klein in Manhattan?
Well, you're seeing the news today that Colin Klein is really not keeping a large portion of the assistant coaches from Chris Kleinman's staff. So I think that's you wondered how that would play out, because obviously Colin Klein's been on this staff before. He knows these guys. And you see Joe Kleinerman go to Baylor today, and a lot of guys not get kept there. Not surprised by Matt Wells, obviously, but I think that I'm interested to see how Colin Klein attacks this, because obviously, he has people he's going to want to hire. I'm sure he'll have people from the A&M staff he'll want to bring with him, but they're still in the playoff. I curious to see how he attacks this in terms of wanting to make this his own, and I respect him. When you get a head job, you got to do that. You can't just maybe agree to, hey, well, yeah, I'll just keep these guys around and we'll figure it out. But I think certainly the conversation starts with Avery Johnson. What do you do there? I think K-State's not that far off. I think Colin Klein's a guy that's going to be able to hold that roster together, I think. He hasn't been gone that long, and I think players are going to have a lot of respect for him and what he's done there. Exciting to see him get the opportunity. Obviously, you can tell Chris Kleinman was burnt out and ready for something new here. And so I think a home run for Gene Taylor there, but probably one that's going to take a little bit of patience.
Will we see a 16-team playoff now because of all the controversy? Is that down the road?
What was your reaction to all that, Max? Yeah, like were you sitting there more focused on like, hey, cool, we get Alabama OU part 2, or we get Tech Oregon, or were you thinking like, oh man, Notre Dame got screwed? Like, how did you digest all that?
Yeah, I mean, I was not shocked. I was not shocked that like ultimately Miami ends up ahead of Notre Dame. Obviously, as we've all said, like the process to getting there, raises a lot of questions. And I think like just sort of like the public distrust in the committee setup seems to kind of be in an all-time high for how long we've been doing this now. Like I'm kind of more of the like belief of like, man, I'd almost rather see them rethink the overall schedule of the sport and start the season earlier and maybe get rid of conference championship games and have room for kind of those play-in games in the final week instead. Like I'd kind of like to see some of those changes be made. I think this was a year where you could say like, man, it probably had 16 good teams that probably deserved to be here. I don't know that I'd say 24. I still think that's quite a leap that I'm certainly not ready to make. But this is probably a year where you had 16. I think there's gonna be other years where you don't have 16, and maybe you don't even feel like you have 12. And so, I think for Texas and Vandy and Notre Dame, these schools on the outside looking in, it's super frustrating. But I think this is just kind of what's going to come with 12. If it goes to 16, like I won't be shocked. Obviously, it's been a very long, drawn out process to get that negotiated, and they're extending it again. So we'll see how that goes. But so far, I'm happy with 12, and I don't know that it's like I don't know that I'd say 12 has like failed us this year.
I don't think it has either. I was just surprised you didn't come on here defending that Duke as the champion of the mighty ACC, 5 losses or no, should be not only in the playoff but with a first round bye.
Well, don't you guys think that they kind of like compromised there and be like, all right, Miami at least like gets an ACC school in, so it's kind of like the lesser of the evils we're sorting through here. Like, and ultimately, like I don't know. I think it's kind of like if both of the G5 teams get blown out in this playoff, people will obviously be annoyed by that and stuff. I like that it happened this year. I think the ACC created its own problems and needs to solve its own problems, and I don't think we need to punish the G5s and set some new rules to try to keep them out of the playoff just because the ACC messed up its tiebreaker this year.
Yeah, I said the other day, the first thing like on Monday morning, the ACC should have a press release that said, from here on out, our conference championship is determined by the 2 highest rated teams in the AP poll or the CFP poll. Done. And then that's the rule. And then therefore you avoid 5-loss Duke sneaking in the last couple of weeks and having the mess that you had on your hands. That's what I would have done immediately. It's just like, yep, two highest ranked, they play in the conference title game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think credit to Manny Diaz and Larry Mensah and Duke for going out and winning a tough game in overtime and taking care of business like they did. But Duke shouldn't have been in that playoff either. So I think ultimately right outcome in terms of Miami being in. I think that, I think that the 3 or 4 days that Notre Dame got out of complaining about this, was probably a little bit excessive. I get it. It's heartbreaking. But the whole, I don't know, that I think that was, a bit over the top, but at the same time, you kind of expect it no matter what the cutoff is, whether it's the 5th team or the 13th team, like it is going to be painful.
Yeah. It's just interesting to see a school of that brand, like that status, have to be the one that's like the victim, so to speak. But yeah, they almost reacted so extremely that you go from feeling like, oh my God, am I feeling sorry for Notre Dame, to like, oh no, they're still Notre Dame. It's still Notre Dame. Like now they're taking it too far. And now like, screw them. Nobody needs to schedule them anymore. That's what it's turned into in like 2 days time, basically.
Well, we all saw it. Once they lost those first 2, it's just like, man, besides USC, where is the opportunity to play good, relevant top 25 teams on the schedule? Like we all saw it was pretty obvious that was going to be the problem with just the way their schedule played out this year. And Pitt came on at the end, you get the game day game and all that, but just Notre Dame just did not play a good enough schedule for everyone to feel like that 10-game win streak really pushed them into a higher tier here.
Max Olson, ESPN.com. Max, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I think it's, you know what I do? I thank Notre Dame for taking the focus off of my school and how snooty they've been.
What is it about all you ACC folks over there?
I don't know.
Snubbed and snooty.
Anybody with gold helmets, apparently.